Dear friends, I'm glad to see you all here. It is 10 p.m., 10:04 in Kiev and in Moscow, Thursday, 28th of April, and we're doing another cast with Alexey Arestovych. Alexey, glad to see you. Likewise. It is day 64. For 2 months and 4 days we are in this damned war. About 200,000 watching us live. There are a couple technical issues. All right, let's go to discussion. What happened new? I was thinking, how will this war be called later? So, like, Karabakh War was called Autumn War or 44-day War. This one could be called a 100-day war. It is pretty optimistic. Yeah, there was one that was a 100-year war. This one is a 100-day war. There are some bad signs that I see. The bad escalation happening, almost the worst variant I could foresee. We recently had 3 missiles shot at Kiev. We took down 2. There was a press conference with the president, and 3 missiles flew into Kiev. They hit an apartment building. But the different part of that story is, how should General Secretary of United Nations take that? They basically spit at his back, probably because of his position about Moscow, because he said, first of all, it's a war, not a special operation. Second, Russian army is involved in criminal acts on the territory of a foreign country. And the third, he called for humanitarian relief. Russia is a constant member of United Nations. And it is still shooting at the General Secretary of United Nations. Using missile in the territory of Kiev, trying not to hit the General Secretary or anybody else, is like shooting a gun 2 millimeters away from your head. So it is interesting to see if United Nations will keep Russia, in this case, as a part of United Nations. So they already did with the push of United States that acknowledged that Russia is an aggressor, that the right to veto cannot be used in this case when Russia is an aggressor. So they need to make a next step. United Nations need to make a step because Russia is approaching the very dangerous border. Now Romania the striker group got to the border with Moldova to indicate that if you're afraid that we'll not shoot Russian airborne troopers, you're wrongly mistaken. Also, we talked yesterday about the landing field in Tiraspol, where they refurbished a bit and repaired some things, potentially for hosting Russian cargo planes. And I have a question. Will you shoot a Russian plane if it'll be landing there? Well, if we can reach it, we will. It depends on technical things, but if it is a transport airplane, it blows pretty low. Well, there are nuances. It could be escorted, there could be other things around, but our military command did notion that we'll try to reach it. So you can see that there is a shadow of war falling on the neighboring regions. There's a shadow of war on Moldavia. There is a shadow on the Russian borderline regions, because as Michael Podolyak said, the war spreads. If you're fighting a war in a neighbor country, the border regions will have things happening there. And right now that shadow is growing, and not just in terms of the war with Ukraine proper, but there are some flames of fires seen around. And today that missile strike on Kiev, basically shooting United Nations General Secretary in the back, I'm curious to see what reaction will happen worldwide. But I suspect it will be pretty stern. Now this problem of Putin needs to be solved, and this is the statement as it was verbalized on the meeting of 40 ministers, 40 defense ministers in Ramstein. So that story is not getting better. Now, tell me this, the conversation with the General Secretary of the United Nations, it would be probably proper to change the charter and find a way to kick Russia out of the Defense Council. Is there a way to start a tribunal or something? Because Russians' right to veto is a big issue. Is there anything we can also do in Ukraine, other missions? Yeah, today the CSE is closing some of its activities in Ukraine. So this is more like a precedent matter. If the countries can overrule the situation with Russia and just by majority kick it out of the United Nations Security Council for the offense. There was an earlier precedent, and we discussed that, yes. There was one back with the Soviet Union. So here, unfortunately, I'm kind of being Master Yoda, predicting gloomy things. And the answer was right. Whatever they came with as a judgment in Ramstein was correct. That problem needs to be resolved. Because the whole threat to humanity by a small group of madmen is a pretty bad situation. I also need to include Belarus here, because if Lukashenko thinks he is safe from that situation, that is not right. He will not be able to stay away. He was involved with it. All right, what's happening on the front? We'll show the map. We don't even need to move our finger on it or show it to our viewers, because not many people are strong in geography. There are people from different countries watching us. Yeah, get your dad who knows geography better. This is actually a good map. There are a lot of names of cities here from Donetsk and Lugansk. We'll start unusually here. We'll take a look at Russian propaganda. The last couple days, what they threw in. They said Russian troops are advancing. Second, they are taking a lot of prisoners and destroying Ukrainian military. And they showed some of the prisoners of war from 79th Brigade. And the soldiers, of course, on that video said the story, how commanders left them on the battlefield and all that. And there was a wave in Ukraine, and I needed to talk to some people here in Ukraine to calm that wave down. I need to explain how that is done. People are captured, so they record a video with these people and throw them in the media channels where their relatives can be found. And of course, people in prison, captured prisoners of war, they will say whatever they're told to say. They need to save their lives, and that's normal. And then these videos are being edited and thrown into those channels, and all of a sudden there is a big wave of condemnation coming in the country that is being targeted. And people are screaming that everything is bad, we're being lied to, our people are surrendering. And this is how Russian propaganda works. But what does it mean? It means that there is a two-sided circumstance created for such a propaganda. So one thing, they did move in the last day for about 20 kilometers toward Barvinkova, a little bit behind the back of our military, a little bit to Liman, that is in direction of Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. Yeah, we can see it on the map. So towards Liman from the east, from Kupinsk. And Russian propaganda was too much in a hurry to show that as success, and they also added a video with prisoners of war who were telling that story, and then sent it into media. So that's the propaganda part. Now, how it works in real life. Russian troops have numerical advantage over us, and they're pushing us out slowly, but they are. And we're holding them while we can, but whenever they eventually destroy our fortified positions, we move back, we fall back to a different position, and we do lose our troops. We have pretty serious losses on our side, but of course Russian side loses way more because they're advancing, and they're basically walking on the bones of the soldiers that were dying there back in 1942 when Germans when Germans attacked some of the Russian troops, got them surrounded and destroyed a whole lot of them. So Russian army cannot do as the Russian army to break the front, and our side cannot repeat what Germans did because we don't have enough power to surround them and cut off their advancement. Now, we got some rumors that Gerasimov is there, one of the Russian military heads on the front. We're checking. We don't know, but at least there is. If that rumor has appeared, it means they're trying to add a media value to that situation. So, what's the core situation there? It's not easy for us, but Russians are also wasting a lot of people doing it. And I already mentioned that you cannot really do 250 kilometers. Initially, they had a plan of 250 kilometers in a few days. They basically have crossed, 20 miles? And they lost a lot more people. Basically, they're running out of army faster than they're advancing. They still have numerical advantage, and they can allow themselves that tactic of pushing us out, pressuring us out. But I need to note here that this is not any kind of victory for Russians, because this is just a matter of fighting the war. We are resisting, and we're orderly pushing back. Now, they can advance to Slaviansk and Kramatorsk even if they are really successful. They basically reach those two cities, which are another two fortresses, and they will have no resources to capture them. They have not destroyed any of our detachments, any of our divisions. Our command knows what we're doing. Of course, it is high pressure, and psychologically it takes its toll on some of the military, the ones that are probably a little more volatile. On our side, they're sending some text messages to their relatives saying that it's pretty rough. And Russian side, what they're doing, they're of course monitoring some of the SMS traffic and some of the phone calls. They're trying to. And whenever they intercept, they see the picture and they try to put more pressure. But here I would want to show an example of Mariupol, how to resist. They're still standing, surrounded, and they're even getting out of their fortress and fighting Russians outside of it. So this is an example of heroism, and we can hold. We need to calm down our relatives that taking Barvinkova and slow push of Russian army does not mean any destruction of our troops. By the way, on Gulay Pole down south, their advancement pretty much froze. Which direction? That's from the south, that big encirclement that they initially had in their plan. Regarding Avdiivka, nothing is happening there too. They cannot advance. So there should not be any reasons for psychological deep depression or failed motives. Another thing, in Melitopol, a big railroad bridge blew up, just happened, and the support to Russian troops is really running into a lot of issues there. So there is a lot of supportive war actions happening behind the front line as well. We have about 360,000 people watching us. Please subscribe to our channel, Feigin Live, and Alexey Arestovych's channel. If you're watching that in English, do not forget to subscribe to Privateer Station. Another question. What if we really imagine that Gerasimov, who is not in favor in Kremlin, because how can he be if initially they had a plan to solve everything in a week, maybe two, in a blitzkrieg style? So what if they took him and threw him now and there to basically push it and command the breakthrough? If he is really there, this construct has a place to be, and it could be called, hey, you promised us that, now go there and do it. And if you cannot do it from Moscow, do it right there in the field. And they basically putting at risk his career and personal security, and he'll not get full success there. He'll never get full success. Now, what is a partial success? They might advance for another 20 kilometers and reach Slaviansk and Kramatorsk, and that would be somewhat a partial success for them, and might, semi-encircle somebody. We'll see. All right. We'll see what else is happening. In Mariupol, you're saying nothing happened operatively. There are some changes. Our Ministry of Defense published data that some of the bombs broke the roof over the hospital, of the underground hospital, and our wounded are in much more difficult condition now, and doctors cannot perform any surgeries, cannot provide proper help. So this is a crime, this is a military crime out front, and although Russian army never cared about not bombing hospitals, they bomb whatever they can. And at this point, it would be nice to try to find a way to at least evacuate the wounded and the remnants of the civilian population. We're talking through all channels, and Erdogan is also participating in this from Turkey, but nothing's happening. But you're saying they're even resisting. Yeah, they're actually leaving the territory, and they're fighting Russians in the city, throughout the city. All right. Regarding the last events with Lend-Lease and the decision of American Congress, so they voted for Lend-Lease. They approved it, and Biden put $300 billion into Lend-Lease. 20 of them will be military aid. So Americans, they settle slow, but they ride fast, and when they saw that there'll be no second Afghanistan here in Ukraine and there are conditions for victory, the help is now flowing much faster. So now we understand there'll be a couple of weeks needed to finish the formulations and some logistical aspects, but I think the whole number already is impressive and should impress respect onto our enemies. This is basically 4 military budgets of Ukraine. And in what time frame do you think it'll be realized? So for that money, there'll be some purchases done and sent to Ukraine. I'll probably be paying for American equipment and maybe some other NATO countries' equipment. It'll be part of the united joint program of destroying Russian army and securing Ukraine's victory in this conflict. Basically, taking Russian army out of the picture because they will not be capable to attack and harass its neighbors anymore. And that was what Austin said. Yes, that was part of the declaration that Austin and the other 40 ministers wrote there in Ramstein. And that NATO action in Moldova, when they actually moved the striker detachment to the border, they showed that NATO is not afraid to confront Russia anymore. So these are actual Americans in the striker group. Yeah, they are. Not Romanians, no. So let's imagine, let's say 1,500 Russians decide to attack Chisinau in Moldova. Do you think Americans might actually go in there and help Moldova defend itself? I suspect they can. It is my supposition, but nobody throws military without any purpose. President said that we're now paying, Moldova said that they're paying the price for not having military to defend itself. So that's what happened in Moldova earlier when they were a bit weaker than one of their pro-Russian regions. So somebody might want to help Moldova to protect itself. It could be Americans or it could be NATO in general. That fact itself might cool down hot shots in Russia, but also this fact itself is putting the light onto the fiery disturbances in the neighboring countries. So they cannot escalate it anymore in Ukraine. It's hot as it is, but they can expand it to the neighbor regions, and that's it. That seems what's happening. All right. To clear that. Do you agree that in this situation that happened, we cannot really talk about negotiations at all? Well, no, we are talking, they're consulting with them daily. They are, but what are we talking about? Well, when they eventually come to a conclusion to shake hands and cease fire, documents and materials will be ready. There is a show in Russian TV that says, "Let them speak." That's the title of the show. So, kind of the same. Let them talk. Let them prepare materials. Okay. 415,000 people watching us live. And all these Russian shows are way behind. We're way ahead with our audience, and that 415,000 people need to show that those fascist assholes that we have good data and Ukraine is resisting, and this is a good channel to tune into. I have a question. Did the history of YouTube have 400,000 live? I don't know, maybe Madonna's live concert or something? I'm actually pretty interested. If we're making any history here. I'm sorry, I cannot neither confirm nor deny, I don't know. We need to check. Ask the chat, maybe they answer us. Maybe. Political translation is different. It's not like somebody flashing their naked butt on the screen, right? So it's just you and me sitting and talking, and, two people discussing it matters. But it's really about the content. Why people come here. All right. So if everything goes the right way with Washington's support and the support of the West, with armaments and everything, about the other aspects of this conflict, different sides, you can hear more and more the statement that it is genocide against Ukrainians. It actually may find its way to the history books. How much does that transfer to the economic support? We know that situation in Ukraine is difficult. Of the economic support, 8.3 billion dedicated for economy. And Europe is also supporting us. I know they're not letting us hang. For example, Europe took all the customs fees, all the duties of the Ukrainian goods for a year. And we are competing with metal and other manufactured goods with other countries. So they're finding ways to support us. They probably will extend it further, and there are some voices to just take it off forever. So this is one of the very bright examples. I suspect they will not let us hang. In many countries, they give us not only weapons, they also give us money and provide economic support and continue with their statements that we're supporting you. Plus, a lot of individuals, it's unprecedented. Ukrainian citizens can cross any border in Ukraine or the world right now. And very often they're even let in without passports, even if they don't have any document. So the barriers that were considered to be fundamental in Europe are broken. Remember the COVID restrictions and everything we had last year, 2 years? There was that hysteria. Nobody is asking any medical documents anymore. So there are big fundamental changes happening in the world. Personally, I like that the West and the Europe is awakening from a slumber, because they've been playing for so long in the peaceful civilian life that they let some of the weird flows to even try to capture their institutions. So on this background of the conflict here in Ukraine, in Europe, some of the values that started to be confronted as of late years, like masculinity and femininity, are actually reviving, and that sort of older kind values are going back in renaissance. So it's interesting to observe that. As somebody who enjoys psychology, and that's part of my work, I enjoy watching these processes. By the way, have you read the speech of Ministry of the Foreign Affairs, Great Britain? She had a great speech there, and she said interesting things there. For example, you and me yesterday or the day before said the West needs to accept the guilt for growing up Putin, for letting him grow as he is now. I was wondering, will they understand that? Because they talk about it in private. But with that speech, she actually did state that we are responsible for letting him grow. How did we do that? We believed that being part of the international economy, letting the totalitarian, authoritarian country join that economy will change the policies and change the internal politics. So look back in 1991, West takes over Soviet Union, Cold War, goes euphoric about its victory, and then to avoid the repetition of what happened in Germany after the First World War that led to the Second, they let Russia to join J7, J20, G20. They give all kinds of economic support, let them join the international economy, and they expect economy to change the structure of society. And that's where they eventually figure out that Putin and his regime are using power, that strength of economy and that faith of West, to enhance their authoritarian tendencies internally and control the opposition and create some sort of control mechanisms to control the West itself, because now they have access to the West and they can use propaganda, they can use all different bells and whistles that the West has were used against the West. She was actually nodding towards China as well with that speech. And she said that they need to set a different set of politics. So whatever Britain has now funding for Ukraine and their own military budget, it needs to be increased. Their current military budget should be considered as the lowest level. Then she also mentioned that there got to be new economic and new military unions formed, where the countries that are possible, that represent possible threat to themselves and other countries, need to be excluded. What does it say? It says that the West is waking up, that they're starting to realize the reality happening around them, and they're now ready to act, to the degree that they're ready to use weapons against governments like Putin's. And their calculation, Putin's calculation that the West is weak and will do nothing, similar as he did with the other countries, they're not true anymore. And also that these economic favors and support will not be spread to the countries that act as bullies and disturbers of world peace and world economy. Because otherwise, they're creating bigger monsters. She's even comparing Russia to Soviet Union and saying that Soviet Union behaved itself way better in the international arena versus current Russia. And current Russia has a lot of technology to misbehave as well. So she did notice all these things in her speech, and she's nodding to new alliances with India, and we need to mention there was South Korea, there was Australia, there were different allies from all over the world, and there probably will be more countries joining that coalition. The Rubicon was crossed. The West is becoming West again and starting to show its teeth. The weak, slumbered body of Europe that was saying not everything is black and white, it's all different, there is never a truth. And then people who are saying that, hey, surrender faster, because why even fight? Now these same people are voting for, the lower chamber in Germany voted for delivery of heavy military equipment to Ukraine. So now we're starting to see a more classical West, where they go and punish the authoritarian dictator who has gone mad and gone loose. So our biggest ally, our biggest support in this conflict, the resource that allows us, that helps us to win, is the West. And Ukraine is essentially accepted in the circles of people who are standing for the freedoms. And Ukraine is acknowledged as a freedom fighter in this case, fighting against the authoritarian regime. And we don't know if President will join G20, but if Zelensky will go to G20, but I think he got his invitation, and he might still go. And I don't think they'll invite Putin. So that discussion about, is Ukraine ready? Are they worthy of it? Is the democracy too young and too developing? At least for now, it is understood that Europe is accepting Ukraine in its group, in its civilization. And similar thing with Moldova. We'll see what's happening there. And by the way, Georgia also made a statement that they're a sovereign country and they can decide their own way. And it depends, though. Some of the politicians there are stating their support to Russia, so we'll see how their people support these politicians and what will happen in the next elections, because Georgia is still a somewhat sovereign country. We'll see what's happening in the world. It appears that the West is waking, up. The spirit of Karl the Great is kind of stirring, and that's a big factor. Before this conflict, I kind of mentally did not expect West to be alive. I was thinking maybe there'll be a little bit of support, some cheer, but that's about it. But right now we are actually excited to see Europe and the bigger West waking up. And even despite the 30 or 40, about 30 years of the West being corrupted first by ex-USSR politicians and now the Russian politicians, now the West sees things differently. And they see figures, they see Putin's figure, and they see the West itself, and they're starting to judge the politicians that helped Putin to get in power and that were empowering him to economically to spread his influence around the world. So more countries and more politicians are making proper statements and judging Putin's behavior and his economic shenanigans the way they should be judged. And it's nice to see that. It's great to see that the West spreading its wings. Right. This is great. With about those 400,000 people watching us. This is the story with the last argument in this juxtaposition where Moscow cannot win. There is no way for Moscow to win militarily or economically. The only way for Moscow to win is to destroy itself. The only means they kind of have is thermonuclear war, and they're sort of nodding in that direction and indicating that this juxtaposition is really putting them down. What is Putin trying to do? He is trying to blackmail the world into the position of submission that you have to give Ukraine, and then I will not go further. He is trying to get there with through the compromise with the West. He's basically looking for a compromise with Washington or Europe or anyone. Give me Ukraine and we'll be peaceful. We'll not go further anywhere. It appears that they may be going and working out this doctrine. Let's pay attention to it. Do you think the West will not fret and will not even give a part of Ukraine to Russia to prevent that thermonuclear war and not turn everything into dust? And maybe push Ukraine to a neutral status, to agree to give some south and some east, and give some guarantees and resolve that situation. Now, as Alexey Arestovych, not as an official face, I can say my personal opinion that the decision is made by the West. I feel that they're not afraid of escalating the conflict with Putin. Even to a degree, they're not too afraid of thermonuclear threats that he is throwing. What scenario do you think is happening? I see that he's shaking the lower basic principles of the West. And when those are threatened and shaken, I think it's out of the question that the West can conquer and can resolve conflicts when they're thrown, when their values are under attack. So, I mean, Europe did conquer the whole world pretty much, and America has joined them in the same group. So that's why I see them as a strong ally who is not afraid of Putin. So, do you think the West can continue as the strong opponent to Putin? Do you think they can even hit some targets in case he escalates? even a smaller response from the West, if Russia hits Ukraine and the West responds in suit, the whole Russian army can be destroyed with the force of the West in a few hours. And if they throw a little more resource, there'll be nothing to attack them with. And frankly, the West has a very good anti-missile defense by these days, and they're ready for different scenarios. At the same time, it is a big question if Russian army and Russian nukes are in the same good condition. And it's also interesting how is Russian society, how Russian people will behave themselves when they start to realize that this is falling towards nuclear war. And also there is China, who would not appreciate nuclear threats and threats to their lives. And Xi Jinping yesterday made a statement that China does not need that war. He keeps nodding that and giving signs that nuclear war is not part of a scenario he would appreciate. So he might, at some point, take a certain side with the West to put that fire out. And you'll see the West started and will probably continue showing signs that they're not fretting, they're not being afraid. There's no reason to even consider the army of the West, the army of NATO, to be weaker than these Russian troops that are trying to take Slaviansk and Kramatorsk for already 2 months unsuccessfully. So whatever Russia has now that is swimming in the oceans will probably be destroyed pretty fast. Whatever is coming from the nuclear silos, anti-missile defense can target that. Plus, the West does have, you should not forget about their intel. So most of the Russian leaders are being tracked and the West knows where they are. And it's, how is that old movie? Don't drink juice threatening the South Central. Forgot the full name of it, but yeah, it's not a good idea. So that meeting in Ramstein was essentially a reaction to Russian behavior and a sign to them that NATO is ready for a bigger war if that is escalated, and annihilating war for Russian regime and their troops. So we'll see what happens, but I think Russia will blink first. We remember talking about the necromancy and all that in regards to Russian leadership. Those people who do manicure and who are sitting at a 20-yard table away from their visitors, they're not really fearless. They're afraid for their lives. And as I always said, people who are fighting for ideals are always stronger than people who are rotten and corrupt. And people at the top of power in Russia are those rotten and corrupt people. Not any single person with good values will sit down with them at the same table. And from, rapists and killers in Bucha all the way up to the Kremlin. And the West is finally remembering their values and their role in civilization on this planet. And metaphysically, if we look at that, all the conflicts are usually being resolved in favor of the strongest. Yeah, look at the potentials. The potential of West, the potential of Russia. It's a 3-day war and nothing is left after. So, for Russia. All right. I think it's a great conversation. Wonderful ending for it today. 470,000 watching us, 175,000 left us likes. Those who are watching us, please subscribe. Do not forget that. Subscribe to Alexey Arestovych's channel. If you just watched that in English, subscribe to Privateer Station. We're trying to keep up with these wonderful casts. And I have a note to conclude this conversation. I have a post on Facebook that is called Eternal Power of the West. If you look it up, I'm trying to describe a little bit what I think about this matter on the philosophic front. Okay, go there, check it out. Let's send everybody to Facebook. And by the way, we're seeing each other tomorrow, right? Yes, we are. tomorrow is a wonderful Friday evening, and it'll be wonderful to conclude that on time. Thank you, everyone who were today with us. We'll see you tomorrow.